Amy Tan's A Pair of Tickets is an interesting literary work in many ways, particularly its plot. The story is essentially told in chronological order, but there are flashbacks and retellings too. Hi, this is Professor George, and I'd like to talk about setting as it relates to this short story. Let's begin by defining setting. In the most basic sense, setting refers to the time and place of the action of a literary work, but it's also more complex than that. So let's talk about each aspect of setting. Place refers to the physical environment of a story, and most stories have multiple physical settings. The physical place could be as narrow as a street, or a house, or even a specific room in a house. For example, Kate Chopin makes important use of rooms in The Story of an Hour. Although the entire plot takes place in one house, the rooms which Mrs. Mallard inhabits are significant. But setting can also be global, such as in what city, state, or country the story takes place. In Chinua Achebe's Dead Man's Path, for instance, the African setting helps us understand a serious belief in dead ancestors walking around. Beyond place, time is also important and multifaceted. In the narrowest sense, the time of day might be significant, but in a broader sense, the historical time might also be important. In Herman Melville's Bartleby the Scrivener, for example, the protagonist Bartleby refuses to do his job of copying legal documents. The short story was written just as industrialization was becoming common, and so this historical time is important to understand the conflict between hand-produced work and machine-produced work. Besides time and place, sometimes things such as weather or climate can be an important aspect of setting. Kate Chopin's The Storm, for instance, introduces us to a wife who commits adultery, in part because a storm strands her husband at a store, and the storm provokes her former lover to seek shelter at her home. Writers choose settings to create various effects. Sometimes a writer may use setting to emphasize theme or topic. This is the case in Steinbeck's The Chrysanthemums. The mountains and the fog, which is like a lid on a pot, emphasize the topic of isolation. Other times, a writer might use setting to emphasize character. In William Faulkner's A Rose for Emily, the condition of the house mirrors the aging of Emily Grierson. A third way that writers use setting is to add believability. For example, regional writers set stories in a specific geographical area. But in order to convince readers that the story really did happen in, say, Georgia, a writer must develop the landmarks, customs, and even speech patterns of the South. In A Pair of Tickets, Amy Tan explores the ways that setting can show us aspects of a character's nature, and how setting can prompt a protagonist to do and feel things that he or she might not otherwise do or feel. Even the narrator admits that her physical well-being is connected to setting. She says, "The minute our train leaves the Hong Kong border and enters China, I feel different. I can feel the skin on my forehead tingling, my blood rushing through a new course, my bones aching." Moreover, we see the narrator become more Chinese as the setting moves closer to China. At the beginning of the story, the narrator feels very different from her China-born mother. She confesses, "I've never really known what it means to be Chinese." Yet, by the end of the story, when she is in China, she tells us, "Now I also see what part of me is Chinese." Looking at the Polaroid photo, she finally recognizes her physical and psychological similarity to her mother. Additionally, the narrator's view of her father changes by seeing him in different settings. Prior to the trip, the narrator viewed her father as merely a 72-year-old man. However, as she watches him riding on the train to visit his aunt, she says, "Now he looks like he's a young boy, so innocent and happy." This perception of her father as a child continues at their first stop as she watches the aunt scold her father and call him by his baby milk name. Yet, at the end of the story, when they arrive in China, her father retakes his authority. She becomes the child and he the parent. He is the one who wakes her. He is the one who controls the camera. In short, Amy Tan skillfully uses setting to help us better understand the two main characters. To summarize, the time, place, and climate of a story are much more than just scenery. Setting can create a mood or provide clues about a character's nature. Setting can play as large a role as plot and characters do. This has been a discussion of setting and a pair of tickets. Thanks for listening.